We're going to start with the big one for this channel, the Packers and the Eagles. Sunday at 4:30. Jordan Love, little injured. Jalen Hurts coming out of concussion protocol. It's a rematch of week one from the season, 34-29. The Eagles won that game back in Brazil. Everybody remembers, especially on this channel, an amazing game back and forth. Saquon Barkley's debut in Philly. Jordan Love and the Packers trying to show that they were the same team that went to the divisional round last year and were ready to take things up a level. We haven't really seen that exactly this year, but in that game, some fireworks. And ultimately, the thing that I take away is the Jordan Love injury at the end of the game and my reaction landing on a plane in Wisconsin thinking, oh my God, like their season's over, week one. And of course, because of the Packers, they wound up being okay. And Jordan Love, thankfully, was fine for the season. So Ziggy, a lot has changed from week one, though. A lot has changed. And in some ways, a lot hasn't. The Eagles, who are introducing Saquon Barkley in that game, have just been dominant on the ground this season. Saquon has 2,005 yards on the season. He was close to breaking the Eric Dickerson record, decided to sit out. But the Eagles, 179 rushing yards per game. That's the second most in the league. They dominate in time of possession. They led the NFL once again. Jalen Hurts has been good on the ground. When you look at this Eagles-Packers matchup, does it all start with Green Bay being able to slow down this Philadelphia rushing attack?
How could it not? I mean, Jalen Hurts is obviously an important player for this game, but he's coming off concussion protocol. It'll be a few weeks. I'm just going to assume he's playing. If he's not playing, this game takes on.
Everything changes.
Coming out there playing, it's a totally different matchup. I have a hard time seeing him being in concussion protocol for 3 weeks. He's going to play this game. But he'll be coming off. He'll be rusty. He's been up or down. Saquon Barkley has not been up or down this season for the Eagles. His last game under 100 yards was the Cowboys, November 10th. I'm not counting that Steelers game. He easily could have had 100, but just didn't because it was a blowout. Saquon's been lights out for them, right? He's gone over 200 yards in a game. He's gone over 150 5 or 6 times this season. He's been a monster for them. Now, I think the Packers actually have a chance of shutting him down. I think if you're sitting back and thinking, what chance do the Packers have against Saquon Barkley? You just have to look at the game plan against the Lions on December 5th. Yep. I know the Packers lost that game, but they held Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery combined 29 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. If you can hold Saquon Barkley to under a century, things start to look very, very different for this game. And I don't care if Dan Campbell is coming out. Things are leaking out about what he was saying. We got some stuff on the mic. He thinks that the Packers are going to lose against the Eagles next week. I'm not buying that. I think this Packers team is a real shot, even with all the injuries.
Yeah, the injuries are a concern. And you talk about stopping the run. That's difficult enough against Philly. But Jalen Hurts this year, he actually is, despite all the controversies, Jalen Hurts is actually having an okay year passing the football. I think he has the highest passer rating of his career. Again, AJ Brown missed some time. Devontae Smith has missed some time. When all of them are playing, this Eagles offense is clearly, and it should be, it's very different. And part of the concern I have for the Packers is even if you are able to slow down Saquon Barkley, which is probably not slow down, more of a let him get his, you contain him. You're missing Jair Alexander, who's been so good when he's played. I didn't realize they're 6-1 with Jair playing and 5-5 with him out on the year. And you remove him. People underrate AJ Brown so much. Like this dude is right up there with the elite receivers in the league. I'm serious. Like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, like AJ Brown's in that conversation, and I don't think a lot of people put him there. It's going to be a tall task for this Packer defense to get some stops. And if I were a Packer fan, I'd be really worried about that. And you saw that in week one, going back to, they had their opportunity early in the game. There was the interception from Hurts. And then I believe the Eagles fumbled the snap and Green Bay walked away with 2 field goals. They weren't able to get touchdowns on the board. And the Eagle offense had a moment where they just became unstoppable. And they had some big drives. I'm trying to remember the one that ended the game. I have it here. I brought this up when we were talking with Bass yesterday. They had the 16-play, 67-yard drive that ate up 7:25 to basically run out the clock and win the game. Like the Eagle offense can do that to you. So I think Packer fans should be very concerned about the injuries on defense, particularly to Jair, and whether or not they're going to be able to slow down Hurts. That's another question, though, is how healthy is Jalen Hurts going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this for the Packers. If Jalen Hurts is on, if he's playing a great game, if he's playing the best football he can, the Packers are not going to win.
Yeah.
Like, it's that simple. If Jalen Hurts is lights out, you could do what you want against Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, both on the ground and in the air, a decent defense. Like, Jalen Hurts at 100% will outplay, I think, the version of Jordan Love we're going to get next week. But as he said, right, that all the offensive starters sat out last week. Jalen Hurts hasn't played football. It'll have been at least 3 weeks since he's played football by the time he shows up for this game. Like, he is not. There's real reason to believe, I think, that this Eagles offense could come out looking a little bit rusty. And the biggest problem the Packers have had all season in these big games is getting off to a slow start. Second half, they've generally played pretty well. They've scored a lot of points on offense. The defense has gotten some big stops. Like, they've been able to handle that once the game gets going. The possibility of a slow start for the Eagles, I think, means the Packers, even with Christian Watson out, even with Jordan Love likely not 100%, though I think the nerve damage will probably be pretty minimal and he'll be playing close to. This isn't like that lingering groin injury that stuck with him for so many weeks earlier in the season. The fact that the Eagles might have a slow start, I think, pushes an advantage towards Green Bay that they can really take advantage of.
Well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to. Like, you can look at the first game of the year with all those opportunities in the red zone that they weren't able to convert into touchdowns. I think it's going to come down for Green Bay to one of those games where you just need to win we talked about again with Bass, like the 6 to 7 plays that are swing plays in the game. And that's going to come down to Green Bay forcing a couple turnovers, converting some big third downs, getting stops on some big third downs. Maybe you throw in stopping the sneak if Hurts is in there. So I look at this game broadly thinking Philly should probably win, just with the way Green Bay's trending right now in Philadelphia, difficult place to play. If the Eagles are able to get their guys back healthy, I expect Philly to win. But the Green Bay ceiling, I've said this all year long. This is where Packer fans are saying we're pandering to the Packer audience here. I think the Eagles are going to win, but I'm acknowledging that Green Bay, when they play their best football, is just as good as Philly. Like, they can hang with Philadelphia, and I don't think you could really say the same where both teams show up and play their best. It's going to be a game. If both teams show up. And Commanders, Eagles, I think the Eagles will still win that game, assuming Jalen Hurts plays. So the Packers' ceiling is extremely high. A lot of it's going to come on Josh Jacobs, who's been so good this entire season. He's kind of become the heartbeat of this Packer offense, where we talk about Jordan Love and the 4 receivers with Christian Watson. Now it's 3, but Josh Jacobs has been sort of a revelation. I mean, he's always been great, but this year particularly, he just feels like he's taking it up another level in Green Bay. And I know he had a year where he led the league in rushing, but he's just been phenomenal. There's a challenge here because you're going against the Philly defense that is number 1 in total yards allowed, number 2 in points scored allowed, number 1 in pass defense after being 31st in the league last year. Like, this Eagles defense has taken arguably one of the biggest leaps in all of football from where they were last year with Vic Fangio. So not only do you have the challenge of Philly on the offensive side of the ball, you also got to be able to score against them. It's a difficult game for Green Bay here.
Yeah, but as you say, the Eagles are right at the top there for all sorts of defensive stats, but they're 10th in opponent rushing yards per game. Now, you don't look at that and say, oh, right, this is a huge vulnerability we can exploit, but it's something.
But you take
Jacobs. Yeah, and Josh Jacobs has shown throughout this season he has the potential to run on anybody. The Packers have faced some good rushing defenses throughout the season, and when his number's been called, he's been able to step up. Not only has he generated a lot of yards, he has 1,300 yards in the season. He's got 15 touchdowns, especially if you look at the tear since the Bears game in November 17th. He's scored a touchdown in every single game. And indeed, multiple of those games, he's had 3 touchdowns. This is a guy who can score big time. And the Packers are going to need that out of him. So look, I mean, the Eagles are favored, and they're favored for a reason. But it's the NFL playoffs. Anything can happen. And when I look at the Packers, they've got an excellent run defense. This is not the defense that we've seen in previous years. I know Packers fans are upset about some of the halfway play calls against the Bears, and fair enough. But you can't let that overshadow the fact that this Packers defense has been a strength of the team for the year this year instead of the kryptonite it was last year. I can see the world in which the Packers are able to go into Philadelphia and beat the Eagles. And honestly, if you look at the teams in the NFC playoff picture, there's not a lot of teams I feel like I could say that for. Obviously, you can say that about the Lions. I think the Vikings would have a chance. But otherwise, I've got the Packers at number 3 on my list of teams that have a potential to go to Philadelphia and win a game.
I might even feel better
ahead of the Vikings after what we saw.
Yeah, I might even feel better about the Packers than the Vikings going in on the road to Philly. I think I'd feel better, weirdly enough, about the Vikings hosting the Eagles than I would the Packers. But in terms of going on the road, outdoor environment, like, yeah, you know, the Packers have, in some ways, have transitioned to a ground and pound team where I felt that with Jordan Love, coming into the year, I was like, oh, they're going to throw it all over the place. But, they've thrown 15. I think Jordan Love has 15% fewer passes thrown this year than last year. Like, Josh Jacobs has been that good. You just got to give him the rock. And that's what's like. It's going to come down to, are the Packers going to win at the lines? If you can run, and now you're forcing the Eagles rookies, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, who've been great, by the way, into potentially some some single coverage situations. Maybe you could get Jayden Reed to burn him 1 or 2 times, and you open things up for Jordan Love a bit. And that's when the Packers become dangerous. Is if people are trying to bear down on Josh Jacobs, let Jordan Love get in his groove. Now all of a sudden, that's when it's a problem against the Packers. And they started to do that against Philly. And they started to do that against Minnesota, Detroit in the second half. Like, they have these moments this year where they do feel unstoppable, but it's been about consistency. And you really just haven't seen it throughout the entire season. And that's what a lot of Packers fans, I think, expected coming into this year was, hey, we did it over the final 10 games last year. They were just basically great for 10 straight games.
They were close to perfect.
They were close to perfect. And this year, it's been a little more up and down, trying to overcome some challenges, and injuries have been a part of that, but injuries are part of football. I mean, look at the Lions here. So I think it's going to come down to, Josh Jacobs establishing himself and then winning those big plays. Maybe it'll come down to the 2 big free agent acquisitions. Can Xavier McKinney get back to his ball hawking ways? Can Josh Jacobs assert himself on the ground? It's a tall task in Philly, but I don't think the Packers get blown out. I'd be shocked if they got blown out in this game.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you brought up Jayden Reed, because if you look at the biggest Packers games this year, Jayden Reed has been almost absent from them. And I think that's been a huge problem for them. Right. Obviously, everybody who plays fantasy knows about the Jayden Reed goose egg against the Lions. But against the Vikings a couple weeks ago, 1 reception for 6 yards. Against the Eagles, the beginning of the season, he had a great game, which helped keep them in them. But then you look at the early in the season, in these big games, they were able to get Jayden Reed involved, right? The early Lions game, the early Vikings game, the early Eagles game. But he's really struggled down the stretch. We talked about this on the show we did with Boss a little bit, right? Like when they've had to manufacture touches for him, when this offense hasn't gone organic, any Packers fan is going to feel PTSD when I say Jayden Reed jet sweep, right? Like those plays have been disastrous for them. They need to go into this game feeling cool, feeling confident, and just letting the offense play out organically. It's felt like when Matt LaFleur has done too much for them, when he's tried to come with all these fancy gadget plays and get Jordan Love doing crazy stuff, it's been a disaster. You've got weapons. You've got Josh Jacobs. You've got a quarterback that can play good football. You've got good wide receivers. Romeo Doubs, I expect to play. Jayden Reed should play. One of Tucker Kraft or Bo Melton or Dontavian Wicks or whoever should be able to have a good game. Tucker Kraft, no one pays attention to him. Great player. There's a lot that can be said about this team. The Packers, both their fans and more importantly, the team, just need to relax, be confident, recognize there's some stuff that's going well for you, and let your big players like Xavier McKinney, like Josh Jacobs, like Edgerrin Cooper, who's really emerged, even as the Packers.
I love watching Cooper. I say it on every show. I think Edgerrin Cooper's been awesome. Like what a way he's come on to end this season after returning from injury. It's fun to watch him. It sucks as a Viking fan seeing a Packer young linebacker. Like that's what you want in the draft when you take these guys. You just want a monster on the defensive side of the ball. And I feel like Edgerrin Cooper is just in on every single play when I'm watching the Packers play. He's a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll see how it goes here. The Jair injury really worries me. I have a feeling that Saquon will get his, but I just have a feeling that with Jair out, and we talked about, are people disrespecting Keyshawn Nixon? Are people disrespecting Carrington Valentine? Like maybe, but AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are the real deal. And and if you let Hurts get in a rhythm, I think this Philly team just becomes a machine themselves. So I'm predicting an Eagles win, but like I said before, I think the Packers have every chance to go in there and get a huge win. And if the Packers beat the Eagles, let's talk about that for a second. If the Packers do win, I love the hypothetical games, then it's on. I think the Green Bay fan base is, I don't even know if I want to say cautiously optimistic. I think they're just pessimistic right now about their chances. If you beat Philly, what better way is there to make a statement to yourself as a team and to your fan base that we can go on a run here? Sure, you got to go into Detroit next, but you just hung with them a couple weeks ago. Like, that's the sort of thing where you can propel this team who's not having the run they had last year. Part of the magical run for the Packers last year was that you had this Jordan Love emergence. They were winning games time and time again, and they were winning them going right into the playoffs. This time you've lost 2 in a row. You might even have a better team, but you don't have that momentum. You'll get a lot of momentum by beating the Eagles. You'll get a lot of momentum. So we'll see what happens. But that game will be 4:30 on Sunday, so that'll be a lot of fun to watch.